Part 7. The Emperor's shamelessness was beyond the imagination. Fortunately, when he was feeling depressed, good news came. His younger brother Pu Qiutai was approaching the capital and would arrive in a few days. When people are in a foreign land, they miss their hometown and relatives even more. Although Pu Qiutai felt ashamed to see his brother, he still felt a little excited and expectant when he thought of his brother's generosity and care, and how he reluctantly walked to the riverside when he went to Beijing. His mood improved a little, and the full power of those tonics came out in his body. He actually gained 2 kilograms of flesh on his body that was blown away by the wind. Has Pu Qiutai arrived? In the imperial study, Xiao Beiji was cutting candleflowers when suddenly he heard Xia Linxuan, who was reviewing the memorial, ask a question. He turned around and saw that the emperor didn't even raise his head. But the pen in his hand seemed to have stopped. Yes, Your Majesty, I heard that he just arrived this morning. Farong said that Master Pu has been looking forward to his brother's coming. As they say, people are in high spirits when happy events happen. I don't know how happy I will be at this moment. Xia Linxuan said, and continued to review the memorial without saying anything else. Xiao Beiji turned around and thought, what's wrong with the emperor? Oh, probably because I heard that Pu Qiutai has arrived. I am also happy for Master Pu. When he thought of this, he almost laughed at his own thoughts, secretly wondering, does the emperor care about his ministers so much? Even Master Shen, whom he relies on the most, is not so interested, right? While I was thinking about it, I suddenly heard a soft pop sound. When I looked back, I saw that the wolf tree in Xia Linxuan's hand had been thrown to the ground for some reason. The young emperor stood up and paced back and forth with an expressionless face. He looked like a tiger trapped in a cage. Xiao Beiji had never seen his master behave like this before, and he was surprised for a moment. He quickly put down the small silver scissors and stood aside with his head bowed, not daring to express his anger. Go and pass on my instructions and summon Pu Qiutai to Yongxin Hall. Suddenly Xia Linxuan stopped, and the words seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth. Xiao Beiji boldly stepped forward and whispered, Your Majesty, Master Pu's younger brother just arrived today. What's more, it's already midnight and the palace gate has been closed. This. Will the palace door not be opened again after it is closed? Xia Linxuan glared at Xiao Beiji, as if he was biting his flesh bit by bit with his eyes. Just do it when I tell you to do it. When will it be your turn to talk about me? After he finished speaking, he sneered and said solemnly, Brother is here? What a happy family relationship. He doesn't even think about who gave him this kindness. If I hadn't made the decree, his brother wouldn't even think about the city gate. Come on, even if you come here to express your gratitude. It's appropriate, right? Xiao Beiji didn't dare to speak anymore, knowing that this was because of his emperor's bad temper, but it was really unreasonable to do this. After all, he was a dignified emperor, so he still had to be cautious about what should be scrupulous. Although Xiao Beiji thought so, he didn't dare to say it. It was obvious that Xia Linxuan was angry at the moment. If he really said it, if the emperor killed him in a rage, even if he would regret it later, he would not be able to survive. Here we come. So, the naughty butler didn't care about Pu Qiutai's life or the reputation of his own emperor, so he quietly left and prepared to send someone to handle the matter. He called the young eunuch over. But before he could give the order, he saw a beautiful figure walking in from outside the palace. Seeing him, she stepped forward and said with a smile, Eunuch Bey, please tell the emperor that concubine Luo feels uncomfortable. Xiao Beiji glanced at her and thought that if she didn't feel well, she would go to the imperial doctor on night duty. Why would she come to the emperor? But of course, he doesn't really know what concubine Luo's intentions are. Now the most favored ones in the harem are concubine Luo and concubine Yan. He has to sell some favors, not to mention, if concubine Luo could save Pu Qiutai, everyone would be really happy. So, he quickly went into report, and sure enough, he heard Xia Linxuan say coldly, "If you don't feel well, go to the imperial doctor. What's the use of calling me?" After saying that, the little palace maid hurriedly said, "Go back to the emperor. Concubine Luo is feeling congested, just want to see the emperor." Xia Linxuan had an impatient look on his face and waved his sleeves, apparently trying to drive people away, but then he remembered something. He was silent for a moment and then sneered. "In that case, okay, then I'll go and see concubine Luo." "What disease does the concubine Luo have?" The palace maid was secretly happy, thinking that this time the errand was done. The reward from the empress must be indispensable. Because of her joy, she retreated to the side to wait, and sure enough, she heard Xia Linxuan say to Xiao Beiji, "Show me the Yinwei Palace." "Ah, Your Majesty, I am a concubine. I am going to die. Ah, I am going to die of joy. Your Majesty." The luxurious bedroom was filled with women's gasping and moaning of joy, as well as the slapping sounds made by the collision of flesh. The woman with an alluring face was wrapped around Xia Linxuan like a snake, and her long satin-like hair swayed gently with her movements. That person also has such long black silky hair. But because he has never tried this position, the long hair is spread on his back or pillow. If it is gently shaken like this, it should be what kind of charm? The face of the woman in front of him slowly changed. Xia Linxuan's waist moved even more powerfully, as if he was ruthlessly ravaging that person. That person was obviously very weak, but also very stubborn and flexible, but still had to succumb to his own man. Concubine Luo, Xu Ruolan didn't know why the emperor was so enthusiastic tonight. She was just secretly happy that she could arouse such strong desire in the emperor. You know, although this man is young, his self-control is top-notch. Between the sheets, no matter how he caters to him or even tries all kinds of tricks, no matter how violent the emperor's movements are, his eyes are always as cold as a pool. The light of the sword is even sharper and dazzling. Therefore, Xu Ruolan never dared to make mistakes, let alone be arrogant. She knew better than anyone else that only by being cautious can she protect her favor for a long time. Otherwise, once she showed signs of arrogance, she would probably be doomed. She was Xu Ruolan and she would never be such a stupid woman. However, tonight, the emperor has changed. Xu Ruolan can clearly feel that just now, the emperor has really indulged in his own body. And even his eyes are no longer as cold as the blade before. She worked harder and harder, reaching climax again and again with Xia Linxuan. This sexual affair lasted until the middle of the night. Even the charming Xu Ruolan finally couldn't bear Xia Linxuan's offensive. She half-truthfully cried and begged for mercy. No need to ask. She was naturally treated even more violently by the other party. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. Xu Ruolan finally panicked. Although there was still pleasure in her body, there was already some pain somewhere. The most terrifying thing was the emperor's eyes at this time. Even though he was addicted to sex, there was a trace of resentment in it. It still made her terrified and silent. He grabbed the woman's breasts with both hands, and the soft and towering feeling finally made Xia Linxuan wake up. He looked at the slightly frightened woman beneath him, and the lust he had just indulged in suddenly became dull. Even the genitals that were rushing back and forth wildly in the path of the peach garden a moment ago became weak in an instant. I was so enthusiastic just now. Did I scare Lanner? Xia Linxuan smiled slightly, comforted the woman in front of him, and then lifted his legs out of bed. Emperor? Xu Ruolan was startled, and her arms wrapped around her like a snake. Your Majesty, it's already midnight, where are you going? I didn't read anyone's cards tonight. I plan to review the memorial in the Imperial study room. I heard that Lanner you were not feeling well, so I came here. Now that you are recovering from your illness, I naturally have to deal with the unfinished political affairs. Xia Linxuan explained patiently, but when he saw Xu Ruolan pouting and still talking, thinking that person might ignore his illness and talk to his younger brother at night, he felt irritated. He stood up and said coldly, "Okay, Lanner, don't push yourself too far. You have always known the way to advance and retreat, and because of this, I am particularly fond of you. Don't think that you can be arrogant because you have accepted the reign and due." The last words were already stern. Xu Ruolan didn't dare to say anything anymore. She quickly knelt down and said in panic, "Yes, I have always adhered to my duty. Tonight, I am willful." Xia Linxuan didn't bother to say a word to her anymore. So he let Xiao Beiji put on his clothes and walked out silently. The moon has passed its zenith and is sinking little by little to the west. The cold air carries the fragrance of plum blossoms. Fortunately, there is no wind, so it is not very cold. Your Majesty. Xiao Beiji came over and was about to whisper a few words of advice when Xia Linxuan waved his hand to stop him, and then he slowly walked down the steps. Just looking up at the bright half-moon in the sky, I don't know how long I walked out. Seeing that only Xiao Beiji was following closely behind me, and the other eunuchs and maids were following more than 10 steps away, Xia Linxuan suddenly asked lightly, "When is Pu Qiutai leaving?" Ah? Xiao Beiji didn't get used to the emperor's rapid thinking for a while, and responded without knowing why, but he soon came to his senses. And quickly said with a smile, "This servant doesn't know, he must celebrate the new year after all." After the new year? Xia Linxuan suddenly turned his head, looked at Xiao Beiji coldly, glared and said angrily, "Who allowed him to stay in Beijing for so many days? I just asked him to come and see his brother, does he still want to settle in the capital?" Xiao Beiji was stunned. He recalled it carefully in his mind for a long time, and made sure that he remembered it correctly. Then he lowered his head and whispered, "Your Majesty, it's... You said that you want Master Pu's brother to come and spend the new year with him. You said that on a day like New Year's Eve. You will definitely miss your hometown and relatives. Did I say that?" Xia Linxuan's tone softened a little, so Xiao Beiji knew that his master must have remembered. He breathed a sigh of relief and was about to speak again when Xia Linxuan waved his hand and said coldly, "I have changed my mind now and asked him to leave before New Year's Eve. As for Pu Qiutai, I will spend New Year's Eve with him." Xiao Beiji took a breath of air and looked at this unreasonable master in disbelief, but saw Xia Linxuan glanced over coldly. "What? Do you think there is a problem?" "No, no problem. The emperor is the lord of all peoples, so of course, you can do whatever you want." Xiao Beiji didn't realize how incoherent his tone was. He just beat his chest and his heart. Golden words, "Your Majesty, you have promised Master Pu this." Your Majesty, since when did you become so shameless? The capital is not as cold as Zhongnan. You, too, are in good health. Otherwise, if it were my younger brother or my parents, I would never dare to let them come. I'm afraid they won't be able to withstand the cold. In the outer room, Pu Qiutai and Pu Qiutai were playing chess and acting. Pu Qiutai's chess skills were far inferior to those of his brother, so the two brothers did not fight seriously, but took the opportunity to chat. "No. I feel that although the climate in the capital is very cold, as long as you put a brazier at home to burn the earth dragon, the house will be warm and dry. And it will be really comfortable for people to live there. It's warmer over in Jiangnan, but the room is damp. I feel like it's not as good as in the north, where the 4 seasons are distinct. And the climate is so crisp and clear. Everyone says that Jiangnan is good, and tourists only like Jiangnan. The spring water is as blue as the sky. And you can paint boats and listen to the rain to sleep. Pu Qiutai shook his head with a smile, picked up a piece and placed it casually, sighing. Why is Jiangnan, which everyone yearns for, so useless in your mouth? If you come to the capital, you will know that no matter how nice this place is, it is not home. Pu Qiutai looked at his brother's face and said with an honest smile, Brother, I know what you are thinking, but you have just come to this point, so you just accept your fate. Along the way to Beijing, I only saw the people living and working in peace and contentment. Compared with the previous few, this new year is so much better. Do you still remember what the people were like when we went to Weiqing Lake for refuge? Although it was because of the war. But even before the war, how could the people be so easy? Before Pu Qiutai could finish his words, he saw his brother's expression darken. Then he threw the chess piece on the chessboard and heard him say bitterly, Shut up, you bastard. Get out of here. Get out of here. Pu Qiutai knew that his brother had been thinking about the kindness of the previous emperor to him, but what he said was also true. Therefore, he felt a little aggrieved, but now he has grown up and is no longer a child who only follows his brother to ask for sweets. So he quickly apologized and said with a smile, Brother, don't be angry. My brother just said it casually. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly heard the sound of chaotic footsteps outside, and then a clear voice outside the house laughed, Ha! Eunuch Bey is here in person, but the emperor wants to summon our young master? Xiao Beiji smiled and said, There is a decree, but it is not a summons. After saying that, he walked in the door and saw that Pu Qiutai and Pu Qiutai had arranged their clothes and were standing under the Kong. So, he quickly smiled and said, It's just a verbal order. The emperor has said that there is no need to be formal. Lord Pu and the third young master can sit down on the Kong. There is no need to get up. While he was talking, he looked at Pu Qiutai and saw that the third son of the Pu family was about in his early 20s. He was tall and strong, with a tiger-like head and a strong head. He did not have any of his brother's handsomeness and frailty, so he couldn't help but feel a little nervous in his heart. With a hint of affection, he nodded and praised a few words. And then asked Pu Qiutai, How have you been doing these days, Master Pu? I think you look good. Pu Qiutai's heart thumped. He raised his head and looked at Xiao Beiji with a somewhat panicked look. Could that bastard want to summon him to the palace just because he doesn't want to live a good life for 2 days? While thinking like this, the scene of that night could not help but appear in his mind. Pu Qiutai felt his legs go weak, and then he sat down on the Kong. Who is Xiao Beiji? He immediately guessed what Pu Qiutai was thinking, and quickly said with a smile, Master Pu, don't worry, I am not announcing your entry into the palace. Our emperor is considerate of you. It's just that the emperor said that the third young master will come to the capital this time. He couldn't bear to be reunited with the old man and his wife on New Year's Eve. So he decided to send a fast horse guard to escort the third son back to Jiangnan tomorrow. He must arrive before New Year's Eve to reunite with the old man and his wife. What, mean? Didn't you say before that you want Qiuming to spend New Year's Eve with me in Beijing? Pu Qiutai frowned. What is the bastard emperor going to do? Qiuming has only been here for less than 3 days. What else did he think of? Xiao Beiji smiled slightly and said calmly, Well, the emperor thought about it and probably still feels that family happiness is far more important than the brotherhood of adults. As for the specifics, I don't know. Anyway, the adults just do as you say. The emperor has rewarded you with a lot of things. Today you will pack your luggage for the third young master. And you will send him away from the capital tomorrow. Be careful along the way. Honor your parents when you get home, and tell them that everything is fine with me. And they don't need to worry about me. If I have the opportunity in the future, I will also go back to my hometown to visit my parents and ask them to take care of themselves and wait for my return. Outside the gate of the imperial city, Pu Qiutai reluctantly held Pu Qiuming's hand and gave his instructions again and again. It was not until the Royal Forest Army came to urge him that he had to put Pu Qiuming down sadly and watched him get on the carriage and then the carriage. Then he rumbled forward, accompanied by 16 horses beside him. The speed gradually became faster and faster, and finally disappeared into a black dot in the distance. After another turn, even the black dot disappeared. Master, go back, you can't even see him. When Shuangxi saw that Pu Qiutai was still looking at the direction in which the carriage disappeared, he still had a sad look on his face. He couldn't help but feel sad in his heart, and murmured, "Even if you stand here for another hour, it is impossible for the young master to come back. The young master has been working for the court for a few years. In the future, he will resign and return to his hometown due to poor health. At that time, he will be able to get together with the old lady and a few other gentlemen. I am afraid that the 3 girls will then be together. She's also married. Resign and go back to your hometown?" Pu Qiutai murmured, and suddenly smiled sadly. Will he ever have the chance to resign and return to his hometown in this life? I'm afraid that the bastard emperor would rather let him die of illness and old age in office than give him any more free days. He dragged his steps back, and as soon as he returned to his residence, he saw several eunuchs waiting outside the door. Pu Qiutai felt a thump in his heart, and suddenly he had a bad premonition. For a moment, he seemed like a mouse that had been doused with ice water from top to bottom. His whole body was stiff, and he felt the cold air coming out of his bone marrow, making every inch of his body's muscles and blood feel bone-chilling. "Master Pu," the emperor said that after the 3rd young master left, "I was afraid that you would miss him too much, so I specially prepared a royal meal today. They are all famous dishes from Zhongnan. Please come to the Yangxin Hall to give you a banquet before Shenxi." "Give a banquet in the Yangxin Hall?" Pu Qiutai smiled miserably. Xia Linxuan's love for Sima Zhao is already obvious. But can he refuse? The younger brother stepped forward, and he immediately used his will to coerce himself. Yes, he is right. As long as he still cares about his family, he will not be able to escape his persecution. Unless he can be truly heartless, put everything down, and die, regardless of the blood flowing behind him into a river. But can he? Pu Qiutai shook his head sadly in his heart, remembering the interesting things his brother told him about his nieces and nephews. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and then said softly, "Yes. Father-in-law, please wait a moment. I will go back and change clothes right now. This is fresh roe deer meat, but it is not as fat and delicious as in autumn. It is winter after all. Fortunately, it is raised in the palace and there is enough to eat, so it is not very thin. It is good to make hot pot. Pu Qiutai, come and try it. By the way, there is also dongpo meat, which has an authentic Zhongnan taste." Xia Linxuan rinsed a chopstick of tender roe deer meat in the hot pot a few times, then put it in a bowl of Pu Qiutai, and gave him a piece of dongpo meat. He smiled and said, "You should eat more meat. Farong said your brother is here. You are very happy. People say you are fat and generous, but look at me. Why don't I gain any weight even though I am happy? I am not a thin-waisted king of Chu." The last sentence was obviously a bit ambiguous. Pu Qiutai blushed. But then he calmed down and slowly swallowed the piece of meat. Then he said calmly, Back to the emperor, my brother has not stayed with me for 3 days. So let the emperor order him to be driven away. Xia Linxuan's chopsticks froze in the air. Thinking of this, he was indeed unreasonable, but what could he do? He couldn't help but feel angry when he thought that the man who was not hypocritical to him would talk and laugh with his brother. And when he thought that the annoying Pu Qiutai would stay until after New Year's Eve, and he might not be able to summon Pu Qiutai into the palace to sleep with him these days. Ahem. Well, I have also taken your parents' feelings into consideration. On the New Year's Eve reunion night, the two old people were very lonely without their children to accompany them. You are a filial son. So you should understand my considerate gesture, right? Pu Qiutai still said expressionlessly. Reporting to the emperor, I still have an elder brother. A younger brother and a younger sister in my family, and my brother-in-law and sister are also with my parents. Since this bastard emperor can be so shameless, don't blame yourself for not giving him a face and exposing his excuse. Pu Qiutai was thinking fiercely in his heart, but he saw Xia Linxuan's expression immediately turned into a look of astonishment, and his tone was also exaggeratedly surprised. He said in a loss of voice, Really? Are there so many people in Qiutai's family? I thought it was just your father. Where are your mother and you two brothers? Oh, it turns out you have other brothers and sisters. Pu Qiutai almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He stared at Xia Linxuan. The other party's shamelessness was beyond his imagination. He didn't understand how anyone in the world could be so perfect at telling lies with their eyes open. Bastard Xia Linxuan even knows how many poems he wrote when he was living in seclusion at home. And now he has the nerve to say that he doesn't know anything about his family members. This is completely shameless and breaks the bottom line. However, it turns out that a scholar like him, who adheres to etiquette and justice, really has nothing to do when he encounters such a shameless and authoritative rogue. Qiutai, do you know that your glare makes me feel hot? Xia Linxuan approached Pu Qiutai, holding dongpo pork, Westlake vinegar fish and other Jiangnan famous dishes for him, while staring at the handsome man in front of him with burning eyes. He didn't know what was wrong with him. Although Pu Qiutai was beautiful, he was not alluring. However, that smile, even the surprised stare just now, could make his blood boil.